I'm here with Richard. We just had lunch. And I want to talk about, because sometimes I'm too hard, and I want to explain a little bit more what I consider is a fake person versus a real one. And in this case, I'm talking about instructor. I want to make something clear. In the martial arts community and self-protection community, not everybody has to be a fighter, because sometimes I push that idea too hard. I want to make that clear. And the example I want to use with, in this case, Richard. Richard is training to become what, or you are already a shooting instructor, right? So in the self-protection community, many people go and say, hey, do you have a military background? More or less the same way when somebody comes to me and tells me, hey, I want to teach martial arts. And I always ask, do you have any fights? But that's one of the aspects, because it's not only about the fights, you also need to have credentials. So that's why I push so hard, and that's why sometimes you see me complaining about the people online that I say, oh, you're fake or whatever, because you don't necessarily need to be a fighter, as long as you have credentials and you understand what you are teaching and you understand what you're giving people. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about that. From your point of view, in the self-protection and related to guns, how does it translate when you're teaching people, when you're getting students? What are the questions they ask you? Because look, I know how to shoot. I may teach somebody how to shoot, but I'm not a shooting instructor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it could be the same, because it does. People want to know your background. If you're, military, law enforcement, have you been in the shooting? It counts, right? For you don't want to be just going to the guy just because he shoots good, right? Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, it really translates to the overall, know-how of the person, or the instructor, or the fighter, or the shooter. Let me give you an example. I'm going to try to simulate the fighting.
Okay.
So let's say that in prison there's a lot of fights, right? But the guy has no background of if he's a MMA fighter, if he's a, jiu-jitsu, capoeira, whatever, right? But he fights every day. So he has the experience of the fighting. So let's say I get someone, and this is really, a broad view, right? Don't take us for, let's say someone in the military, right? Or, no, better yet, someone from the Brazil gang, or whatever gang in the world, right? Well, it doesn't matter. Let's say the favelas in Brazil, the gangs, all those videos that you see of people killing. So you would translate that, just because he has the experience of killing people, he should know how to teach me.
I see what you mean.
Exactly. So then I would go to you and say, I became an instructor. I study that every day. I focus on that every day. I do as many courses. I try to be the best that I can. I try to update the market. So now you as a student, you're going to say, okay, I have a gangster that has the killing background. Or me that I did out. So it's really, I know where you want to get of.
Well, the point I want to make in relation to martial art, let's mention this guy that I'm very hard on him,
okay.
Jake Makes, because I don't like many of the things he does. The problem with him is, for what we know, he trained one style called Shaolin Do. But then he goes and says, I trained Tai Chi, or he goes and says, I did Shaolin Kung Fu, and then he does something that people don't. People who are not educated in martial arts see him and think, that's real Shaolin Kung Fu, or that's real Tai Chi, when it's not. That's the problem that I have with some people. Like, for instance, if Jay Makes goes and say, I train Shaolin Do, and this is what I teach, Shaolin Do, I wouldn't have a problem with him. That's the example I want to make. He doesn't really need to fight as long as he understands the program.
Yeah, in fighting, it's really hard to compare to shooting, because with shooting, you're not going to have a conversation like this so normal, be like, I've been in 100 shootings and I know exactly what the guy's gonna do, because you just gotta shoot. It's different. I do agree with you in the fighting that if someone doesn't spar or hasn't really fought, it's different, because we both fought, right? I'm not a teacher like him, I'm not an instructor, but we fought. I fought many times. I'm from Brazil, and
we have a spar too.
So it's different. If you just read a book and you see a video of fighting, is not the same as someone that actually fought and has a little more credentials. It's different. The shooting is different, because how many people actually going to say, I killed 200 people, now I'm going to be a better instructor? No. It depends on what you're teaching. But in fighting, it's a little
Well,
hard to simulate.
I know, but at the same time, if you have a curriculum similar to shooting, shouldn't be a problem. What I'm trying to say, in my personal point of view, it shouldn't be a problem. Let's say you now decided to teach karate, but you go to Japan or you train with somebody here and you learn karate, right? You train for 7 years, but you have no interest in fighting. Are you fake? No, because you have the credential. That's what I'm trying to say. Same as in shooting. What I see wrong is, what if right now I get a gun and start teaching people how to shoot? I'm not really qualified to do so. That's what I have a problem with.
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm trying.
Yeah, you're not qualified. The meaning you're not qualified, it also is in the eye of the beholder, right? Mm-hmm. You see a lot of people on the Instagram and in the shooting community also doing, having 300,000 followers, 1 million followers, and it really depends on what type of shooting he's teaching you. What are the backgrounds? Obviously, if a guy never been in the military or law enforcement, let's give an example, I don't know, SWAT, that the guy's going to keep knocking down doors and, going in with a team, clearing rooms. If the guy never did that or never got an instruction to do that, doesn't mean that just because he's a shooting instructor that he could go to that area, right? So there's different areas, just like in shooting, just like in fighting. I think I understand what you're trying to say. Stay in your lane, right? If you know karate, don't try to be teaching jiu-jitsu.
That's exactly my point.
And if you know karate and you did a seminar or 2 or 3 or 4 of jiu-jitsu, don't try to teach jiu-jitsu. You're not going to know jiu-jitsu. Just because you do a seminar or 2 or just because you do a course or 2 in shooting doesn't mean you're qualified to teach that. The teaching itself, because you're a teacher and you're a fighter, is different. The teaching itself is a category on its own, because you could be a good shooter and you could be a bad teacher.
You just got to the point I really wanted to make.
You could be a good fighter, right? But
you could not be
exactly. You're not going to be a good teacher. It doesn't go like that.
So
teaching itself is different. It's just like, let's say, now we're going to abroad a little more. Basketball player, right? The coach doesn't mean that he's a good player, but he knows how to coach the people playing basketball.
Freddie Roach, the coach for Pacquiao, he has a really bad record of fighting, but he's an amazing coach.
There you go.
That's exactly the point where I wanted to get. Sometimes I'm very hard on people, but in reality, this is what I mean. You have to have credentials, so at least you have to understand what you're teaching. And the problem, in my case, what I have in the martial art community is that, so these people come, they show an idea that could get somebody hurt. They are not qualified, because when you're trained, same guns, when somebody's not trained, that doesn't understand what they're doing. So these people come, they start teaching something that doesn't exist or it doesn't work. They claim certain styles, like to get the safety of the umbrella. Let's say, I teach Kung Fu, this is why I do this hand, whatever. But the point I'm trying to say is you have to have credentials and understand what you're doing. You don't necessarily need to be a fighter to teach fighting. You don't necessarily need to be a Marine to teach shooting. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's in a broad spectrum.
Yeah, in general.
Fight is fight.
If we start, I'm talking about teaching in general.
Yeah, no, teaching is a curriculum on its own. Teaching is different.
That's what I wanted to explain in regards to. Sometimes I'm very hard, but what I mean is when people are teaching something, they have to know what they're teaching. They have to understand, and they don't necessarily need to apply it themselves. Like, they don't necessarily need to be a fighter to teach fighting. Or the example like Poe said, I told you, you don't necessarily need to be a Marine to teach somebody how to shoot, but you have to know what to teach. You need to know the laws, the regulations, what is right, what is wrong, and the right way to do it.
And even though doesn't mean that you have the credentials of an instructor or a teacher or a sensei or a sifu, that means that you're good.
No,
that's another. So
that's all.
You as a student or as the client, you have to, see that and compare. That's why in the shooting community, you do as many courses, as you can with different instructors, because each instructor is different. Even though sometimes it's the same thing that they're teaching, they have different ways of teaching. A punch is a punch, but you have different ways of
punching
and how to teach it. where it comes the power, how to move, the footwork, protection. So it's a punch, a right? If someone says, okay, give me a hook, it's the same hook. You're not gonna reinvent the wheel, but probably your way of teaching is different than the other way of teaching.
That's correct. Anyway, let's cut the video for now. Thank you very much for being here, Richard. Guys, if you like this type of video, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for helping me once again, and that's it.